The legendary fights in the history of UFC. What fight comes to your mind when faced with such a question? Perhaps the most anticipated fight, or the fastest knockout, or a memorable upset? Choosing just one is an incredibly difficult task, but in this edition, we've tried to compile 5 fights that can contend for the status of the most legendary in the past 30 years. Guys, subscribe to our Telegram channel, Wild Fighter. The link will be in the description. UFC live broadcasts, fight announcements, and all the major news from the MMA world in one place. Everyone is welcome. George Masvidal versus Ben Askren, the most hyped knockout in recent years. For George Masvidal, the year 2019 was truly a breakthrough. That's when Gamebred transformed from a regular gatekeeper into a big star. A significant role in this transformation was played by the knockout in the fight with Ben Askren. To this day, this finish remains the fastest in the history of the league, just 5 seconds, forever changing the lives of both fighters. Askren entered the UFC as an undefeated champion of 2 major promotions, Bellator and ONE FC. In his debut, he secured a controversial victory over Robbie Lawler and planned to make a statement in the fight against Masvidal. Both fighters worked hard to hype up the fight, taking jabs at each other in every interview, so fans eagerly awaited when the fighters would finally be left alone, locked in the octagon. George has always been primarily a striker, a tough brawler, and a big-time finisher. Ben Askren, an elite wrestler, who once even represented the Olympic team. His entire MMA style was built around wrestling. As soon as the referee announced the start of the fight, George unexpectedly rushed at Askren, who clearly did not expect such a brisk start. Masvidal created a stressful situation, making Ben nervous. And when a fighter is nervous and doesn't know what to do, he goes for the legs. This was exactly what the sneaky Cuban had calculated. He finished the charge with a powerful jump and a knee strike that hit the exact target. Askren collapsed on the canvas unconscious. George landed a few more finishing blows, which he later called super necessary, and then mockingly mimicked Ben's fall. At that moment, the arena was filled with a huge number of top-tier stars like Khabib, Cejudo, Adesanya, Usman, and many others. They were all shocked by what they saw and didn't hide their emotions.
Facts.
Oh! Wow! Let me see that. Out of here. Oh. Wow! Nah!
The fastest knockout in UFC history happened before their eyes. No one had ever finished an opponent so quickly and in such a spectacular manner. The whole fight lasted 5 seconds, and that was enough to forever overturn the careers of both fighters. For Askren, it was his first career defeat, but it completely broke him mentally. He returned to the cage just 3 months later, lost to veteran Damian Maia, and announced his retirement. The man who came to the UFC with championship ambitions hung up his gloves after only 3 fights in the #1 promotion. There is no doubt that Masvidal's knockout played a key role in this decision. After it, no one in the world could associate Ben with anything else. Everyone talked about him exclusively as the guy who got knocked out with a flying knee. As for George himself, the brightest victory of his life allowed him to rise to the status of a superstar. Specifically for his next fight, an individual BMF belt was made. He twice had a title shot against Kamaru Usman. Thanks to his popularity, his fees multiplied, and media attention was unavoidable. Those 5 seconds helped George, despite not many significant victories, rise to the level of the highest paid and most sought-after fighter in the history of the league. Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva, the most gruesome injury in title fights. The first fight between Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman created a lot of buzz due to its unexpected outcome. The Spider had not lost for 7.5 years and 17 fights. With 10 successful title defenses, he was not the most dominant champion in middleweight history. The knockout by the young and inexperienced newcomer Weidman, who had fewer professional fights in his career than Silva had title fights, was seen as a system failure and a mistake that the Brazilian would correct in the rematch. Only 6 months passed between their first and second fight. This time, Anderson did not allow any antics that led to his knockout. Now, the Spider was completely focused and collected. His opponent was a powerful wrestler with heavy strikes who had already defeated him. Now, Chris had to be taken seriously. Moreover, Weidman was 9 years younger. He was not even 30, while Silva was approaching 40.
Anderson, the Spider!
Despite all this, the Brazilian was still a favorite by both fans and bookmakers, and he was expected to use his experience to defeat his tormentor and reclaim the championship belt. Weidman understood his strengths and started fighting from the first minutes. Just 1.5 minutes into the fight, the Spider was already close to an early defeat.
Looking to finish him.
Chris took him down and began pounding the former champion's head into the canvas with brutal ground and pound. Silva survived the storm by tying up his opponent on the ground. But Weidman did not ease up and continued to terrorize the Brazilian with constant strikes until the end of the 5-minute round. In the second round, Silva began controlling the distance. He responded to Weidman's attempts to get close with sharp counters and crisp low kicks.
There's a good shot to the body. Oh, nice. Oh, no! He hurt his leg, and it is all over!
One of these low kicks turned into an absolute nightmare for him at the 3-minute and 45-second mark of the second round. He broke his shin, a gruesome injury that kept Anderson out of the fights for more than a year. There was no talk of a title shot after his return. Silva was no longer the same in any of his following fights. He lost 5 out of 6 matches and ended his career with a streak of 3 defeats. To this day, this injury is considered one of the most brutal in the history of the UFC. Just one low kick forever broke the great career and turned the best middleweight of all time into an ordinary veteran, unable to beat even mediocre opponents. Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo, the most legendary dethroning of a dominant champion. The first featherweight champion, Brazilian Jose Aldo, was the dominant king for a long 5 years, until Conor McGregor came for his head. The extravagant Irishman rolled over all his opponents, racking up 6 consecutive victories with 5 finishes, managed to win the interim belt, and then set his sights on the most dangerous opponent in his career. The promotion of this fight, with a world tour, a huge number of bold antics by the Notorious, and the psychological duel between the 2 best featherweights is legendary in itself. The promotional campaign gave the MMA community a huge number of bright moments that fans still love to remember. The fight itself was supposed to be a tough test for McGregor. Jose Aldo was the best striker in the division and topped the P4P rankings. A match with such a monster could be anything for Conor, but not easy. Aldo had not lost to anyone for 10 years and 18 fights. During all this time, he fought at the championship level with the best of the best and invariably left the cage as the winner. However, Notorious did a phenomenal job in the lead-up, impacting champion's psychological condition and mental calmness. Conor bothered the Brazilian so much that when the referee announced the start of the fight, the emotionally uncontrolled Aldo immediately rushed at the trash-talking enthusiast. This played a cruel trick on him. McGregor caught him with a fatal counter, responded with a precise lateral, and knocked the dominant champion down.
Oh my God! Unbelievable! The first punch he threw!
These 13 seconds truly became legendary and seriously influenced the balance of power, not only in the featherweight division, but throughout the industry. Notorious became the undisputed champion and turned into a massive star.
And timing beats speed, and that's what you saw there.
His popularity went far beyond mixed martial arts. He literally became the face of the sport, and after defeating Aldo, he set out to conquer new heights that were previously inaccessible to any other fighter. Jose Aldo, although returned with a victory after 6 months and even managed to win the interim belt, but was never the same again. He couldn't regain the title, never got the desired rematch, and slowly but surely began to slide into the role of a deserved veteran who alternates between victories and defeats. Conor McGregor vs. Khabib Nurmagomedov. The most lucrative and sensational fight in history. The showdown between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov is arguably the most famous bout in the 30-year history of the UFC. It's hard to recall a similar example where the entire world, including those who had never watched a single tournament, was talking about a fight. At that time, Khabib was already the undisputed champion, but hadn't defended his title yet. Some fans still doubted his potential, just because he earned the title in a bout against Al Yaquinta. Conor, a former champion, stripped of his title due to long inactivity, had never lost his belt and was eager to reclaim it. The hype around the Irishman was at its peak. He had just had a dream fight against Floyd Mayweather and had yet to face a defeat. The situation with Artem Lobov and Conor's attack on Khabib's bus added more fuel to the fire of this rivalry.
You wanna fight or something like this? Send me a message, hey, come here, this place, and that's it.
Since then, this fight became something personal for both fighters. Stylistically, the Dagestani with his wrestling was highly inconvenient for the knockout artist McGregor, but the world was accustomed to the Irishman shocking everyone with his fights, so anything could be expected from the collision of the two best lightweights. The start was decent for Conor. He landed some precise strikes and managed to resist Khabib's takedown attempts. However, Khabib's pressure eventually took over. He cornered McGregor against the cage and controlled him on the ground for the rest of the round, preventing him from returning to a standing position. The second round began with Khabib sending the Notorious to the canvas with an unexpected overhand. No one could have imagined that a fighter with a relatively average striking level at that time could knock down one of the most gifted punchers in the lightweight division. Even Conor didn't anticipate it. However, after a brief exchange on the feet, the fighters returned to the ground, where Khabib continued his dominance. It was so overwhelming that all three judges scored the round 10-8. It became clear that McGregor needed a finish to win. In the third round, the Dagestani decided to take a break and conserve energy. Almost the entire 5 minutes passed in a stand-up position, but it lacked vivid moments. Nevertheless, Conor, with more active actions, won this round in the eye of all three judges, giving him the opportunity to claim that he had won a round against Khabib for a long time. The fourth round became fatal for McGregor. He missed a takedown and, after lengthy resistance, eventually gave up his back and had to tap out due to a neck crank. The referee had to intervene to separate the fighters, as the enraged Khabib, despite McGregor's tap, didn't hurry to release the submission. The most anticipated fight in the history of the promotion ended with Khabib's overwhelming victory. However, even this conflict was not over. Driven by emotions, Khabib jumped over the cage, performing his famous eagle jump, and attacked Conor's team.
No.
Mayhem! Oh no! All hell has broken loose!
Dylan Dennis, Conor's jiu-jitsu coach, was a particular target of Khabib's team. In contrast, Khabib's team flooded into the cage. McGregor had to fight with Abubakar Nurmagomedov right on the octagon fence and fend off Zabira Tukugov, who broke through the security. The major scandal concluded with Khabib's lengthy suspension, although initially, White even contemplated stripping him of the title. Khabib returned to the competition exactly a year later for another title defense. As for McGregor, he also took an extended break and even announced retirement, but later returned to the big stage, never fighting for a championship again. The event featuring Khabib and Conor became the most lucrative in the history of the league. With 2.4 million pay-per-view buys, estimates suggest it brought the promotion between $150 to $180 million. Practically everyone on the planet, regardless of whether they follow MMA or not, is aware of this confrontation. Probably, this fight made the most significant contribution to the global popularization of the UFC, attracting a colossal number of new viewers for the company. Holly Holm vs. Ronda Rousey. the most unexpected upset in history. The bout between Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm, which took place in 2015, will forever be etched in the memories of everyone who witnessed it live. Ronda Rousey was the biggest name in the women's MMA world. No losses in her career, Strikeforce championship belt, and later UFC, 6 impressive title defenses. Ronda never let any fight go to a decision, finishing every opponent in her path. Her dominance was absolute. The 7th title defense was supposed to be routine. 28-year-old Rousey was set against 34-year-old Holly Holm. Holm had a decent boxing background, a title from a small American league, and only 2 victories in the UFC. That was all that the contender could boast with. Naturally, she entered the fight as a massive underdog. However, when the fight started, fans were in for an unexpected surprise. From the very first minutes, it became clear that this evening would not be easy for Rousey. Starting to box with the world boxing champion, Ronda found herself in a role that was highly unfamiliar to her. Holm dominated the champion in the stand-up and did not allow grappling and controlled the distance. Rousey absorbed one heavy blow after another and was completely shocked by the turn of the fight. No one had ever felt so confident against the former P4P #1 among women. In the second round, Holm continued to take the initiative, appearing more composed and catching the lost in the octagon Ronda off guard several times. Rousey was shaken and at the beginning of the round found herself in a flash knockdown from a simple jab. Unable to get up in time, she succumbed to a devastating head kick that not only knocked out the champion, but also shattered her entire future career.
Holly looking to finish! Holly Holm is the new UFC bantamweight champion of the world!
Holly Holm sent the undefeated champion into knockout, handed her the first defeat in her career, and left her without a title. It was impossible to imagine a more shocking outcome. To this day, this fight remains the biggest upset in the history of the league. For Ronda Rousey, this defeat marked the beginning of the end. She returned to the cage a year later, suffered a second knockout loss in a row, and announced the end of her career. Holly Holm took away the belt from the main star of women's divisions. Part of her hype, but couldn't take away her skills. In her very first title defense, Holm lost the belt, losing to Miesha Tate. Holly's subsequent career was also not particularly outstanding, but just one fight and one head kick permanently inscribed her name among the most famous personalities in UFC history. Feel free to comment on which fight is the most memorable for you in history. Perhaps it wasn't included in this top 5, as there are many significant fights beyond the ones we discussed. Subscribe to our Telegram and see you next time.